Hi, everyone. Welcome. Looks like we've got a couple people on. I'm going to give you all a few minutes to get settled in, let a few more people join us. But while you're waiting, if you can locate the chat box, which should be over probably on the right-hand side of your screen, and it should say chat and have a little type message here button, and tell me to you, what is the purpose of motivational interviewing? This is going to be a super interactive session. I think we're going to have a small group and really want to make it do some quizzes, help you kind of refresh if it's been maybe a couple years since you've gone through motivational interviewing or behavior change conversations. Remember some of those key points, and then at the end we'll go into kind of an ask the audience discussion where I would love for you all to share how you've been using motivational interviewing, what issues have arisen, what you need help on, what's worked really well, and all of that. So if you, again, in the chat box, if you can go ahead and type in your answer to what to you is the purpose of motivational interviewing. And if you're having any issues with technology, you can also type that in too, and we will try to troubleshoot. For those who are just joining us, while everybody gets settled, please go ahead and locate the chat box and type in, what is the purpose of motivational interviewing? And if you can put that in the chat box instead of the questions box, then everybody will be able to see your answers so that we can have it a bit more of a discussion. That'll be great. All right, welcome everyone. Looks like we've got a few more people tuning in. Go ahead and type into the chat box the answer to the question on the screen while we let everybody get situated. Looks like we've got a bunch of people on. And if you have no idea what the purpose of motivational interviewing is or can't remember, you can type that too. Again, if y'all can type into the chat box instead of the questions box, if you see that, that would be great. I see one person says the purpose is to energize folks to have a real conversation about transportation options. That's great, I like that. To help participants find their own solutions. Great. All right. Another answer here, to create self-motivated change and to allow the end user to discover the intrinsic value of behavior change. Awesome. All right. And tell me, can somebody let me know, can y'all see the chat box, or is the questions box the only one showing up for you? Nope, nobody sees the chat box. Okay. Huh. All right, well, we'll just do it through the questions box. That'll work too. Okay. So I'm going to put up a quick poll. So hopefully you all are in the place where you expect to be with behavior change conversations, what I'm kind of jokingly calling an alumni reunion webinar. Obviously it's a digital alumni reunion, but hopefully you'll get a chance to kind of reconnect with maybe some of the classmates that you have gone through a training with, kind of refresh what motivational interviewing is, and hopefully get you re-energized and excited to start using it on a daily basis in your work or in your personal life. So as I was getting ready for this webinar, this is the first one that we've done of this type. I went back through over the last 5 years that I've been teaching motivational interviewing and realized that I've actually had almost 100 people go through trainings with me, which is really amazing. Most of those are in Central Texas, but I've had some people fly in from out of state to join me, and then I also co-facilitated a workshop at the Association for Commuter Transportation conference last year. So if anybody's joining from there, welcome. And I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll just so that we can get an idea of who all is here. So you should see on your screen, when did you attend motivational interviewing? Hopefully you remember. And just go ahead and click and answer that so we can get an idea of who we have here. Okay, give you just another couple seconds to answer that. Hopefully you remember when that was. All right, just a couple more people to answer. I'll go ahead and close it. Okay, so it looks like most of you attended in the past year, which is great. So hopefully it's fairly fresh, and a couple from 2018 and 2017. Our next poll, I'm curious to see how often you've actually been using motivational interviewing. Hold on, let me get that poll up. So let me know whether it's doing entire motivational interviews or just using one piece of what we learned in the training. How often have you been using it since you went through the training? Whether it was a few years ago or last year. All answers are okay. Just want to get an idea of kind of how familiar you are and how often you've been using it. Give you all another second to answer. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you have been using it monthly or every few months, and then about half of you have really not used it much since the training. Totally okay. Hopefully today will kind of get you excited about using it again. All right, so you all had a lot of different answers to what is the purpose of motivational interviewing. If you haven't typed that into the questions box or the chat box yet, go ahead and share your answer. And really to start out, we just want to talk about what motivational interviewing is. And I think that in some of your answers, y'all really have captured this nicely. So we had energizing people in one answer, having a real conversation, having participants find their own solutions. I like that. Self-motivated change, allowing the end user to discover intrinsic value of behavior change. There's something there about kind of that internal motivation. And then let's see who the next method for eliciting behavior change through self-motivation. Eliciting, that's one of our MI words, so good job. So the definition of motivational interviewing, just as a reminder, it's a person-centered guiding method of communication to elicit and strengthen motivation for change. So those of you who typed in your answers, I think you hit it on the head pretty well. So what that means is that it's led by the participant. The answers are coming from them. One of you mentioned that in kind of your purpose is getting the answers out of the person you're talking to. It's not leading or following. And really one of the key things that we'll talk about today is that it's facilitating movement around that cycle of change. So it's not only just trying to get somebody to change their behavior, going from, never having thought about it at all to all of a sudden it's a new habit they've started the next day, but just taking those baby steps around the cycle of change. Speaking of which, hopefully you all remember this, the cycle of change. Just wanted to do a quick refresh. So when you're in pre-contemplation, and probably many of the folks that you talk to are in pre-contemplation, they've really never thought about changing their behavior at all. As soon as you have a conversation with them, you're taking them into contemplation. They're at least thinking about it. Even if they haven't decided to change, they don't know what they're going to do, it's at least on the radar. And then the next step is preparation. So maybe they've started researching what they might want to do, or they've come up with it on their own through a conversation with you, and they're starting to prepare, put the steps in place so that they can really take action on it, which is our next item, action. So say if somebody, in the context of transportation, if they're driving alone every day, if they start looking into their bus routes, action is going to be the first day that they take the bus. And then hopefully through many repeated actions, you start to actually form that habit, and it's just maintenance. Maybe you're taking the bus more and more often, or doing that behavior more and more often. And then eventually it becomes a new habit. And that's termination, is when that habit becomes entrenched. Of course, as anyone who has tried to keep a New Year's resolution knows, it's not always that easy. So there's always relapse and recycling. Sometimes people even don't go exactly in a circle on the cycle. They may get to action and realize, oh wait, that doesn't actually work for me at all. And then they have to jump back up to contemplation and preparation to try to find a different method for them. But I think it's important, both as we're having conversations and also as we're measuring the success of our programs. I know we've struggled with this here at Movability, is somebody starting to take the bus or starting that new habit isn't the only measure of success, right? Moving them along that cycle of change, even if it's just getting them into contemplation, is really powerful. So the writing reflex is another thing that I wanted to do a quick refresh on. This is something that I think a lot of people struggle with because we're so well-intentioned in what we're trying to do when we're having motivational interviews. And I'm going to just make sure that nobody else has popped anything into questions. Okay. So with the writing reflex, just a reminder, the writing reflex is all about trying to help people figure out what the right thing is for them, but also what the right thing is for us. Really, that the writing reflex is all about coming into a conversation with an attitude of, I have the answer. Let me tell you the answer. And for those of us who spend a lot of time, say in transportation, helping people change their behavior, it can be really easy to slip into that attitude of, I know all the bus routes, I know all the bike lanes, I know exactly the best way for everybody to get around. Just tell me where you live and where you work, and I've got the answer for you. While that can be very efficient, it's not usually very effective because, as we know in motivational interviewing, just having the answers and knowing how to do something isn't usually enough to get somebody to change their behavior. And so often when we get into this writing reflex, we start getting resistance. So if y'all can type into the chat box or the question box, how do you know if you're hitting resistance? Obviously, if you see an angry baby, but what are the kind of signposts in a conversation that tell you, oh, okay, this person may not be fully on board with this. Maybe I've taken a misstep or misinterpreted something. What are some of the things that you all have seen, maybe through your experience, or just something that we've talked about in this training? What are the signs of resistance? I'll give you all a moment to type those into the questions or chat box. All right. Still waiting for a couple more people. I see physical cues, checking watch, backing up. Yep. That sounds like maybe somebody who's done some tabling, right? If you're having a conversation with someone and they're like, oh, okay, well, nice to talk to you. They sort of start physically backing away. Yep, that's a really good cue. What are some other cues that somebody may be resisting you? Go ahead and type it into the question box. Verbal cues. Well, got to run to a meeting. Again, somebody trying to sort of end the conversation, getting some resistance there. Yeah. If anybody else has some examples of resistance, go ahead and type them in. Again, this is an interactive alumni reunion, so if y'all aren't answering and responding, this will probably be a short webinar. So some of the things that I've seen for resistance are arguing, right? Challenging, discounting, maybe sometimes outright hostility, interrupting. No, that's not what I mean. Negating, ignoring, passive resistance. This, I think when people are trying to be nice, this is often the most common one, right? Is, oh, sure, okay, yeah, I'll try that. Okay, sure. And you can tell that it's not really genuine. Maybe it's coming sooner than it really should be. Carrie says, can't take the bus, got to transport kids. Yep, so throwing out some barriers or reasons why. Depending on kind of the context and tone of voice, sometimes that is an actual barrier, right? And a conversation, and they're saying, oh, this is an issue, but, let's solve it. But sometimes that is definitely the resistance. They're just throwing stuff out. Yep, we have in our field specifically, turning the blame onto us is what Anika says. Yeah, absolutely. This is your fault. It's not me and my choice. It's about you and what you've provided or about the infrastructure. Defensiveness. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, that's a really big one. Giving excuses like it's too hot. Yes, especially in Austin. Or it's not the perfect scenario. Oh, this one little thing isn't right. So if you're getting resistance like that, how do y'all, usually that means that somewhere the conversation's gotten off track, right? So how would you all start to shift that? If you want to type in, just tell me, what technique would you use? What phrasing would you use? How would you try to shift that conversation? And if hopefully this is starting to remind you all about your motivational interview training, then maybe some of the techniques that we discussed in motivational interviewing or something that you want to mention. Anyone have some thoughts on how you respond to resistance? Great. Ashley says, repeat or summarize with what I hear you saying. Yes, absolutely. Really great for you to not confront it with force, but just step back and say, okay, well, here's what I'm hearing, which tells them that you're listening. And sometimes if somebody's not ready to change, sometimes all they want is just to know that somebody's going to listen to them, and that'll be a good conversation. Carrie says, I hear that it isn't safe for you to bike. Tell me more about that. Great. I love that. It's a good way to turn it back to them. You're hearing them and you want to understand better. Use affirming language. Yep. Move on to a different topic, says Kathy. Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it's just, okay, maybe I was, pushing biking too hard and really it's something else that we should talk about, or whatever that may be. And Anika says, reflecting that there are challenges. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's especially for people in our field, that's a really fine line a lot of the time, right? Is reflecting or affirming that, oh, yes, it is hot outside, right? This is Austin, or, yes, there are some challenges here, while at the same time not necessarily enforcing those beliefs. So I think one of the key things that I always recommend is trying to stay as neutral as possible when you're doing those reflections, especially if it's getting into a resistance situation. Trying to say, okay, I hear you that it's hot. What can you do about that, right? Carrie says, we definitely don't want folks to bike if they feel unsafe. Have you explored other options? Yeah, absolutely. And that's saying, yes, we hear you, we understand, and let's continue the conversation. And, really all of these things that you all are mentioning, what it's telling the person you're talking to is that this conversation is not about me, it's about you. So tell me more about you and what you want and what your challenges are. I'm not going to pull you or, put you down a path that you don't want to go down. Yeah, love that. So the other thing, just kind of part of our quick review for the first half of this call, is wanted to address some micro skills, which I think are always a good thing to remember, and they come with a handy acronym. So if anybody remembers what that is, there's a hint in the picture. Anybody remember what our micro skills acronym is? ORS, yes. Anybody remember what those stand for? So you want real challenge mode here. Somebody has their notes out. Okay. So ORS is open question, affirmation, which, open questions, affirmation, which somebody mentioned in a way to deal with resistance, so great. Reflexive listening, an important one, and summarizing. So remember that reflective listening, that's what you all were talking about and how to deal with that resistance. It's what I hear you saying, or, that this is what it sounds like you're telling me. So really, you all remember it, but also you actually know how to apply it, which is great. And Kathy points out that if you attended the ACT training, the acronym we used was ROARS, and the other R was writing reflex. So different ways to approach it. But yes, those are all the things that we're talking about here. So ORS, ROARS, writing reflex, open questions, affirmation, reflective listening, and summarizing. Any questions about everything we've talked about, or any other comments that y'all want to mention around that? Okay, not seeing anything. So that kind of wraps up the first half of today, which was sort of going over some of those skills, jogging your memory. And now for really the fun part, which is Ask the Audience. So we're doing a couple decades throwback here to good old Regis Philbin. Really, I want to just have a conversation with you all and give you the space to open up and talk about things. If you see this little, I can't quite circle it, but this little hand that should be over next to your name, if you raise your hand, click the little hand button, then I can actually unmute you, and you can tell us about maybe an example of how you've used motivational interviewing, how it went, what worked, what didn't, the good, the bad, the ugly. If you have an MI-related situation that you need advice for, whether it's like a specific conversation or maybe there's a broader program that you want to apply it to and you want to get some advice on how you might apply that. And then just kind of any general questions about behavior change. We can do our best to answer. And this is, while I'm certainly here and can answer some of these questions, part of my idea was that you can get feedback from each other and share these ideas with each other. So let's see, open up questions. Go ahead and raise your hand if you just type into the question box, I want to talk, then I can unmute you from my side so that you can share your anecdote or story. But really, this part is all about you all. and what you need help with or how you want to apply it, or even, if you have some questions about something that we had gone over in the training previously that you want another refresher on, we can definitely talk about that as well. Not seeing any hands yet. Give y'all another couple minutes. But if we don't have anybody who wants to speak, then we'll probably just go ahead and wrap it up. So really, this is y'all's opportunity. Okay, so see a couple of questions here. The first one was Anika. So Anika, I'm going to just go ahead and unmute you. And if you can just go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about kind of your question and how you use motivational interviewing. Great.
Oh, I was hoping that you would just relay it to the rest of the group, but
you're not getting off that easy, sorry.
So I've used some of the techniques or tried to remember them when I've had some conversations with employees here at Whole Foods. We're just trying to promote our commuter program and benefits and services that we're providing. So when I do have somebody that comes to me that says, I'm interested in doing this, they're pretty much unfamiliar with the program. So I tried recently to just start having a conversation in general about how they're commuting now and what they want to be doing and what they want their commute to look like and kind of what goals they're trying to achieve in general before talking about the commuter program and our transit benefits and saying, these are your options and these are kind of your solutions. So I have traditionally always wanted to, provide the solutions at the beginning, and then the challenges kind of arise and we address them. But I did try to start by just having a conversation about, again, what do you want your commute to look like? What are you doing now? How do you want to change it? What are your, what do you have going on during the day and during the week? Just to identify kind of where the challenges and the barriers might be before providing some prescriptions.
Okay, great. And how has the response been when you've tried to sort of broaden up that conversation?
I think it's better. I mean, people are limited in time, which is challenging because they just want to kind of get their questions answered and not have a full out conversation. And it honestly, right, it sometimes can feel a little silly using some of those reflective sentences. So I've just been trying to figure out a better way to make it more conversational and more, instead of, actually saying the reflective statements and just make it more natural to tell you the truth, right? To say, like, it sounds like this is what you want to do, and you don't have great access to transit, but we can, here's your last mile, first mile options that we provide, things like that. I think it was well received. Unfortunately, there's not always an option for everyone, and so it feels it feels like I'm defeated if I can't provide a really great solution for them right then. But I let them know that I'm taking the feedback, back and trying to curate a better program or a better experience for them, as we grow our program. But yeah, I think just kind of getting to a point where it's more conversational and it's easier to implement some of these strategies in a more natural way and conversational way.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And I have a couple thoughts on that. And if anybody else has some thoughts, suggestions, feedback, go ahead and either raise your hand or you can just type into the question to me, and I'll unmute you here in a minute so you can chat with us. But a couple things come to mind, Anika. One is just that sometimes when a commuter comes to you for help, they may be at that preparation action stage already,
Right.
And so sometimes and that's hard to identify, within the first minute of conversation where somebody is on that cycle of change. But sometimes knowing that, if you've made an effort to broaden the conversation and it's feeling awkward, then it's probably just because they're actually almost at that action step, like they're feeling motivated and they're ready. And so that's, sometimes that's the case. The other thing to remember, I think, is that sometimes that feeling of frustration that you can't provide an option for everybody comes from the writing reflex. And it's totally a valid feeling to have, because I've had that feeling too, talking to people, wishing I could give them the perfect solution that would fix all their problems. But just, giving yourself, not being so hard on yourself, and remembering that you don't have to fix everyone and fix the solution for everyone. Even though we wish we could, sometimes that's just another iteration of the writing reflex. And, if you're open to someone having the conversation and making them feel heard, sometimes that's a success in every step, even if it's not perfect.
Right, yeah.
Anybody else have some comments for Anika or thoughts on that? Or anybody else experiencing the same thing? Awesome. Thanks, Anika. I'm going to go ahead and put you on mute here and go to our next question. So the next question that I see is from Carrie. Carrie, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And if you can tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with the pledge cards and, what your goals are with that, we can help you out.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Buto. I work for the City of Austin Transportation Department on our TDM team, and I support projects to reach residents as well as our city employees. And we went through a lot of effort to update the pledge cards that Movability had been using in the past in conjunction with commuter conversations, and we had a whole bunch of cards printed, but we haven't used them. So I'm wondering if I can get some tips on how to work these cards into conversation. We have about 700 employees that will be moving to a new building in June. And so we're going to have a lot of opportunity for conversation. I'd really like to see these cards getting used.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie, for bringing that question. And I think that's a great one. So again, if anybody else has some thoughts for Carrie, please go ahead and either raise your hand or type into the question box so that I can unmute you. On our side, the way that we used those initially was for a program where we were actually out on the street. So we didn't necessarily have a way to contact the people that we were stopping, because it was just kind of random strangers. And that was our way to leave some contact information as well as a pledge card. So it was kind of both of those things. But I think, really it works best when you're having a full motivational interview conversation. I think it can be a little bit challenging with the shorter ones. But one idea, I don't know if y'all have tried either handing it to someone to fill out or filling it out yourselves. Maybe it feels a little bit awkward to say, here's this thing, fill it out and then keep it. But if you're having a conversation with someone and, you have your fancy looking clipboard or whatever, and you jot down some notes while they're talking, even if you're, asking some of those motivational questions, my recollection is that the pledge cards have, here's what I'm going to try and here's why I'm going to try it, kind of two slots for that. If you jot down kind of what they've said, then at the end, that could be, hey, here's a little reminder from our conversation, and it also has my contact info, so if you have questions, or it has the website or whatever, that may be a way to integrate it in a little bit more.
Okay. I think that's a little awkward, though, writing it in for them when we're trying to accomplish a person-centered approach where they take initiative for themselves. And that, to be honest, the majority of the conversations we have are at tabling events, so those cards are really awkward to work in at a tabling event. And we put sign-up sheets on the table for folks to sign up with us for longer conversations, but rarely do we get anybody signed up for a longer conversation.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think definitely agree that in an ideal world, right, you have can have a 20-minute conversation or even 30 minutes, and then they can write down what they're going to do. Obviously, you know that we don't live in an ideal world. So I would say personally, I would just experiment with, one tabling event, try writing it in yourself and handing it to people, see how that feels and how the response is. At another one, try handing it to them and asking them to write it down. Just experiment and see what seems to work best.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. We're about to launch into monthly meetings with our mobility coordinators that are associated with the departments that will be moving to the new building. So I think we'll have lots of opportunity to experiment and see if we can figure out a system that will work for us.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about, if you have a mode-specific event, if you're talking about like your, coordinators going out and having a specific department do a bike event or a, traffic bike presentation from Cap Metro or something like that, maybe there's an opportunity to work that in at the end and say, okay, who's ready to commit to trying this one time? And then everybody who raised their hands, you can, go hand them a card and have people write it down or something. There could be a way to do that so that you're getting that buy-in before you hand them the card and can bring it to a bigger audience.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, good question. Anybody else have thoughts for Carrie, or has anybody else tried using pledge cards or some sort of leave behind that specifically might address motivations or, a commitment to try something else? Not seeing anyone. Okay. Well, kind of last call, I'll give y'all a minute to think about if you have any other questions or situations where you've tried out different options or, tried some of the micro skills or some of the bigger philosophies of motivational interviewing, or maybe brought other behavior change components in along with motivational interviewing. I'd love to hear from y'all. As y'all are thinking about that and getting those last questions in, I want to draw your attention to the handouts section, which you should be able to see, hopefully, over in your toolbar over on the right-hand side of your screen. Seems like the toolbar is not looking like what I think it looks like, so maybe you don't have this, but you should have 3 handouts. These are things that we handed out in the workshops, but depending on your organizational prowess, you may not have them anymore. Carrie says she sees that section. Thank you, Carrie. But it's 3 things. One is the MI scoring form, which obviously, unless you're actually training people or, training your staff to do motivational interviewing, you're probably not going to be giving people grades on it. But I think some of the questions there are helpful ways to judge yourself and just things to keep in mind as you're having the conversation. And the same with the MI reminder cards. This isn't something that was developed for our training or specifically for transportation, but I found it in some of my research on motivational interviewing and thought it was just some really good thought-provoking questions to go through and see, how are you falling on these things, different ways to sort of score yourself in how you're doing. And then the last one is our post-workshop handout, and it's just kind of a quick and dirty summary of the workshop, all things motivational interviewing that we teach. So again, if you need something to print out and stick on your desk or remind yourself about some of these key components, definitely go ahead and download those. You can just click right on them to download the 3 PDFs. So go ahead and do that now if you'd like them. And I'm not seeing any other questions coming up. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. My contact info is on the screen. If y'all ever have questions about motivational interviewing or, want to have a conversation about it, I'm happy to chat with you. This is like one of the most fun parts of my job. So definitely let me know. And if you have a team at your own company that you would like to train in motivational interviewing, or have a few colleagues who'd like to get together, let me know. Reach out. We'll probably do our annual training for 2020 in late spring or early summer this year. Is what we're going to target it for. So all of you should be signed up for our newsletter, and you'll get information about that. But if the timing doesn't work, or if you have a bigger group, please reach out to me so that we can see how we can deliver this training to the folks that you want. I'd love to continue building capacity here in Central Texas and throughout the country in motivational interviewing so that we can really change some behavior and change some lives. One last reminder for those that are in Central Texas, Movability's biggest event of the year is coming up on February 5th, 2020. That's the Mayor's Mobility Breakfast and Awards Ceremony. It's going to be really fun. We'll have mobility bingo and other kinds of games. We'll be presenting awards for the Central Texas Best Workplaces for Commuters. We'll have delicious breakfast tacos, tons of coffee, all that good stuff. So definitely, if you don't have your tickets yet, we are almost sold out. So go ahead and sign up for that. If you need the link to sign up, just go ahead and shoot me an email or give me a call, and I can get you connected with that. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. You should have a poll as soon as you leave the webinar. A poll or a little scoring sheet will pop up where you can provide feedback on the webinar. I would really like to get your thoughts to know, should we do this again? Was it helpful? Would a different format or different topics be helpful? Definitely would love to get your feedback on that so we can continue to improve the program. So thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.